From Provo, Utah, county prosecutors have revealed the charges they have filed against 22-year-old Tyler Robinson in connection with the murder of Charlie Kirk. We're also learning that prosecutors will seek the death penalty for Robinson as they announce those 7 charges against him, including aggravated murder, a capital charge. We're going to talk more about this. Let's bring in CBS News senior coordinating producer for crime and public safety, Anna Schecter, joining us now on set here. Anna, this was a lengthy press conference. What were your biggest takeaways?
Well, one, the added charges and a little bit more details about the charges we learned about yesterday, those preliminary charges. So aggravated murder, that's a capital offense. And then the felony discharge of a firearm, those first 2 counts are carry aggravating factors because, as John Dickerson was just saying, because of Charlie Kirk's political views, that he was targeted because of those views, also because the murder occurred in the presence of children, that children were there and witnessed it. And he made a point of noting that. Then we have a total of 7 charges, including witness tampering, and those pertain to his efforts to get his roommate not to talk to police, to the media, and also the fact that he was changing clothing, so trying to hide the crime. So we learned a little bit more about that. It was a fascinating press conference, Nancy. I was really surprised by how much information we got. We got the entire timeline and then a full text exchange immediately after the shooting between Robinson and his roommate, which essentially portrays him as being more worried about the gun that he left in the bushes.
His grandfather's rifle.
That's right. How am I going to tell my dad that I lost the rifle? And less worried that he just killed Charlie Kirk, who's a husband and father. And I think that Jeff Gray there, a Utah County attorney, laid that out just to present to the public the facts. There's been so much speculation. Let's just lay it out. There's also, you even heard reporters asking, is the roommate going to be charged? He might have wanted to just lay that out because those are the facts that he's dealing with. In that text exchange, it does not appear that the roommate had any prior knowledge, and essentially it puts the blame solely on Robinson there. Now, the FBI continues to investigate, so if anything changes, if anyone else knew about it or contributed to this, they will, of course, step in and file charges. But at this time, this is what they're working with. They're treating this as a state murder. We heard that right at the top. And when he was asked about federal charges or potential, terrorism charges that prosecutors might be looking into, he said he doesn't know anything about that, and he's not going to comment on any of the evidence. He basically laid out what he's working with.
Yeah, absolutely, as their investigation continues. And I have plenty more questions, but first I'm going to turn things over now to Carter Evans, CBS News national correspondent there, who was inside that press briefing. He joins us now live. And Carter, you were inside the room. What were your biggest standout points inside that press conference?
I think the main thing that I noticed is something that Anna already mentioned, which was shed some light into what he was thinking immediately after this shooting. And it clearly, at least according to the text from the roommate there, he was concerned about police finding that rifle and possibly finding fingerprints. He was also scared that he was going to see news about the inscription on the cartridges on one of the news stations here. And he said that that was a big concern to him. We also learned that the mother was one of the first ones to notice that the pictures that authorities had released looked a lot like her son. And she confronted her son and said, "Where are you?" And he said that he was homesick. His mother and father conferred and agreed that the picture definitely looked like him, and also that the description of the gun and the picture of the gun that police had released looked a lot like a gun that he had been given as a gift, and it turns out it was his grandfather's gun. And again, the text between the roommate and Robinson indicated that he was concerned about what he was going to tell his dad about losing that gun, and he was trying to recover that because it was the only evidence that he had left at the scene, or so he thought. But it turns out that is not the case. He did leave more evidence at the scene. He had some evidence, some DNA evidence on the rooftop where he was. There was a tremendous amount of surveillance video and those surveillance photos that did capture a photo of his face, and that is what led to him turning himself in the first place, and the fact that the FBI released those photos the day after Charlie Kirk's death. So we're getting a lot better picture of what happened in the moments following the shooting of Charlie Kirk and what this alleged shooter did afterward.
And Carter, so much has been asked in the past week about what was the reason behind all of this, what was the motive. And prosecutors laid out, as you mentioned, a little bit more evidence, actually plenty more evidence. I know some of this has been trickling out in the past few days, but I thought what really also stood out for us here was that the cartridges apparently had etchings, according to the prosecutor. They're also talking about what Robinson's demeanor has been like in this past year in terms of changing according to his parents. Does that line up with what you've also heard on the ground and talking to people there?
Yeah, that lines up with what we've heard, and it lines up with what we've heard all along. As you say, information has been trickling out all along, and this is just a confirmation of what we have been hearing over the last couple of days. But we did get a lot more detail with those text messages, and we got some more information about evidence that they found as well. Not only did they find bullet cartridges inscribed in the gun, but they also found bullet casings with similar inscriptions at his home, as well as a target that had been used for target practice. They wouldn't go much farther than that. But one thing that I found interesting, too, was a text to the roommate that said, look under the computer keyboard. And under the computer keyboard, prosecutors say, was a note basically admitting that he had done this. Mm-hmm. And the roommate took a picture of that note. So it looks like they have a tremendous amount of evidence against him. The prosecution here was asked if his admissions to his parents and to his roommate will count as an admission of guilt in a court of law. And the prosecutor basically said that would be up to the jury.
Carter Evans, thank you very much. And here we are just past 3 o'clock here on the East Coast. I'm going to do a quick reset of what we've been hearing. Prosecutors there announcing that they will, in fact, seek the death penalty for Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old accused of shooting and killing Charlie Kirk just last Wednesday over there at Utah Valley University. Prosecutors also announcing 7 charges against the 22-year-old. That includes aggravated murder, a capital charge. We also understand he will now be held without bail in the Utah County Jail. We're going to turn more to our team coverage of all this. I'm going to go back actually now to Carter Evans, who we were just talking to before. And Carter, we were talking about some of the standouts from that press conference. It also stands out to me that they gave so many details relatively still early on in this investigation.
Right, they gave a lot of details, and they gave what they thought was necessary, essentially to show the court that there is reason to move forward with this case. And in just a couple of hours, he will appear virtually, Tyler Robinson, that is, virtually for a preliminary hearing. And they say that's going to be really quick. Basically, the judge is going to read the charges against him, and they are going to determine if he has an attorney to represent him. And then the legal process will continue moving from there. I plan to be at that hearing, so we'll watch that for you, and that will be live streamed as well. So we should be able to see what he looks like today. We know that he is being held in the Utah County Jail right now. He's being held in a special housing unit where he is being observed to see if he could be a harm to himself or others. We are told by the sheriff that that observation period could take several days. They want to make sure that everything is in order before, if and when they release him into the general population. But it will be interesting to see what he looks like today. Does he show a sense of relief on his face, as some individuals do when they are accused of a crime and captured? Will he speak at all? The prosecution would not indicate if he was cooperating right now, but we had heard over the last couple of days that he has not been speaking with investigators, as is his right. We also learned today that he told his roommate not to speak with investigators. And in fact, he told his roommate to go and get a lawyer if police approached him. And that's one reason why he was charged with obstruction of justice.